All right, I'm going to try to help you get started on an activity called Patterns of Volcanism in this video. So there's an assignment that is built into a spreadsheet. Google Sheets spreadsheets have green icons, so you may have noticed this looks different than the typical Google Doc that you work in. Spreadsheets have columns with letters on them, so column A and B and C, and then they have rows that have numbers on them, row number 1, 2, 3, etc. Those can be used to identify boxes called cells. So I've currently selected cell D4, which is empty. That's going to come in handy when we're working with numbers in a table down below because each box of our table has a reference as well. Keep that in mind as we work on this. So for this assignment, the directions say, first of all, just to look at the data in table 1 below. You'll notice that the data is incomplete, but it's showing some information, not necessarily about a single volcano, but about volcano belts. So we've got the Kermadec in New Zealand and volcanoes in Italy, and then the Tonga region and the Aleutians, etc. Also notice that they're showing us the length of those volcano belts and how many volcanoes make up that belt. And then there's some blank columns as well, and that's what we're going to be working on. There's also a column called volcano years, and they explain that up above. This is how many years that a volcano somewhere in that volcano belt was erupting. And then, of course, you probably know what an explosive eruption is. Maybe you didn't recognize that some volcanoes explode and some volcanoes just kind of ooze, but there's different degrees, I guess, of eruption that they've put in the data table. The next step says to determine how many volcanoes there are per 100 kilometers, and then they give you some instructions on how to do that. Let me show you how we're going to do that down below. I actually have a nice little trick that I'm going to teach you. I'm glad that you're here watching this because I can teach you something that maybe you didn't know about Google Sheets. Google Sheets has a built-in calculator. So when they tell us that we want to find how many volcanoes there are per 100 kilometers, we can type that as a formula. And if you want to just try this with me, we can see if this formula works. Now, as I'm typing it, I'm going to be using little apostrophe, I guess, in my formula. That'll disappear in just a minute. You don't want to type the apostrophe in yours. You want to start just with an equal sign. To find the value we're looking for, the number of volcanoes per 100 kilometers, we're first going to find the number of volcanoes per kilometer by dividing 7 by 352. But I'm not going to type in the number 7 or 352. I'm going to type in the reference. So D21 divided by C21. And then I need to take that answer and multiply it by 100, which I'm going to type as asterisk 100. Okay, so your formula should look something like this, equals D21 slash C21 asterisk 100, and that will divide the number in columns D by the number in column C, multiplying it by 100, and should give you the volcanoes per 100 kilometers. All right. If you get an error, go back and make sure you typed the formula correctly. If you get nothing, if you just get what I got there, all those letters and characters, you probably typed the apostrophe. You don't want to do that. Just start your formula with an equal sign. The really cool thing about typing these in as formulas is that you can then take the formula you already typed once and you can copy it and you can paste it into all the other boxes, and it will update that formula because of the way we typed it, so that in the next row it will automatically change to equals D22 divided by C22. So it'll divide these numbers and multiply them by 100. And you can do that all the way down this column. Just keep pasting it in and get all your calculations done very efficiently. So let's try the same thing for calculating the volcano years per 100 kilometers. To do that, we're going to take the number that's found in F21, the volcano years, and divide that by the length of the belt. That's the number that's in C21, and multiply that by 100. this should give me the volcano years per, not every kilometer, but per 100 kilometers. And again, if I type the formula once, it should give me a number right there. If you've typed yours in without the apostrophe, you got a number there. Just take that formula and paste it into all the boxes below and let Google Sheets update the formula automatically to F22 divided by C22, F23 divided by C23, etc. as you paste it in. All right, the next column has explosive eruptions per 100 kilometers. And by now you probably understand how we do this. As a formula, I will type this equals first, and then I'm going to type in the box that has the explosive eruptions in it. That would be H21, and I'm going to divide that by the length of the belt. That's box C21. This will give me the explosive eruptions per kilometer. I want it per 100 kilometers, so now I just multiply that by 100, asterisk 100, and that's the formula I'll use for the explosive eruptions per 100 kilometers. Okay, read carefully as you're doing this. I think step 5 tells you what symbols to put over in the last column. You can put, I think it says to put an O if there were very, very few explosive eruptions for every 100 kilometers. If there were more, I think we're using an asterisk. And then if there were a high number, relatively high, we're using an X for that. So I'll let you figure out what kind of symbols to put in there. All right. So I do want to put in at least a couple numbers onto the graph, which is the next step. I'd like to do that with you. When I calculated these values, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it was something like this. And I don't remember the explosive eruptions. Let me fix this formula and have it do the calculation. Okay. In fact, I'm going to have this give me the actual numbers for both so we can make a graph. Yep, I thought I messed that up. All right. So the last step of this, it wants you to make a graph. And for this activity, the graph is already set up for you, but it doesn't have any data on it yet. So we have graph paper down here and some numbers up above that we're going to be adding to the graph. So the one that we just calculated for Italy was, let's see, they want us to put the volcanoes per 100 kilometer on the x-axis. I'm going to put a 2 on the x-axis and a 68.5 on the y-axis. Had a lot of explosive eruptions. I believe that one gets the X for the symbol. So let me do Italy first here, the one that we just worked on together. And then we'll go back and we'll do the Kermadec as well if we have time in this video. Okay, so to put Italy's data point on the graph, I'm going to double click. This is actually a picture down here, so it says to double click it if you want to edit. It's a good idea to get rid of that little clue there. It'll make our graph look neater when we're done. And then I'm going to put a dot on my graph at 2 volcanoes per 100 kilometers. That is right where my cursor is now. And then I'm going to go up to 68.5, and this one is supposed to be an X. So watch this little trick. I see in my key they've already got an X set up. I'm just going to click on that, and then I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that. And then I'm using my buttons on the keyboard right now to move that over so that it's a little bit easier to get it where I want it. I know I want it to line up with 2, and then I wanted it up at 68.5. Now remember, this axis, it looks like they've only labeled every other line, but I can tell since it goes 20, 40, 60, 80, that the lines in between would be the number in between those two. So if this is 60 and this one's 80, then this line in between is 70. 68.5 should be a little bit below that line. So I'm just going to drop that one down a little bit. And I've got my first data point, which is actually the second one for Italy. Let me go back and put the first data point on as well. That was for the Kermadec at 0.9 volcanoes per 100 kilometer and 0.9 volcano years per 100 kilometers. That one happened to be 0.9 for both. I also remember that that had very few explosive eruptions, so I was using this symbol